Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Yashasvi Taiwade. She's second year BTech student in mechanical engineering in IIT Bombay. She's also convener of Kritika, which is the astronomy club of IIT Bombay. So in the first session, she will introduce the theoretical foundations of exoplanet detection, focusing on the basics and key concepts. And she will also give details of fundamental techniques like transits and radial velocity. Yes, welcome again, Ms. Yashaswini Taiwade. Please start your session.
Yes, sir. So I hope I'm visible and audible.
Yes.
Okay. So, welcome everyone. So today's session is on exoplanet detection.
Yes, before you start, will you take questions in between, or you would like to take them at the end?
I would like to I would like to take them at the end.
Okay. So there will be questions in the chat box, but we will discuss them at the end.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll share my screen. I hope my screen is visible. Yes. So, welcome everyone. So today's session will be on exoplanet detection, and so this session is also it includes one of the important applications of coding in astronomy. So this is one of the another applications of computational astronomy. So without further ado, let's start the session. First, let me walk you through what all will be in this session. So first, we will discuss it. This is first of all a very beginner and basic session. So you obviously do not need to have any prerequisites or anything. I will explain everything which is required from the start and from the basics. So we will first start with what is an exoplanet, why we are detecting exoplanets, then what all can we detect, then the methods of detections. So there are a lot of methods of detection, but recently in the upcoming years, a few of them have been proven to be very effective. So we will discuss them, and so forth. We will discuss some other things that will be required for you in the next session. So without any further ado, let's just start. So first, what is an exoplanet? So an exoplanet is any planet which is beyond out of our solar system. So now most of these they orbit other stars, but there are some which are free floating. So and they are termed as rogue planets. So and these rogue planets basically they just orbit the galactic center, and they are not attached to any star, or they don't revolve around any star. A basic explanation for exoplanets. And now, why do we want to find exoplanets? First of all, it's just humans' unending curiosity. But obviously, there are many other reasons, like we want to find life beyond Earth. We Because we want to find how life can evolve, how life can survive beyond Earth. Then again, we want to find Earth-like planets, so a second Earth, and also for reasons like how to understand galactic evolution, and then just to find out like in how many different environments can life evolve and survive, and how many different forms it can take. Now these are the examples of some really fascinating exoplanets which have been discovered till now. So I find these fascinating. Now these are a few examples. Now the first one is HD 189733b. Now, this planet is interesting because over here it rains glass, and not just that, but it rains sideways. So, yeah, getting hit by the glass sideways, it will be quite a fun experience. Not a fun experience, a deadly one still. So, next is Vostral B. So from the shape, you can see that it is an oval shaped and egg shaped planet. Now, there is a reason for that. The planet is very close to its star. So, because of the tidal forces from the star, it attains an egg shape. Next, we have J1407b. I hope that everyone knows this planet because it is really, really beautiful. You can see I could not even get the planet over here because of its fast ring system. And next, we have next we have a 55 Cancri E. So again, another fascinating planet. Now, what all can be determined? So using these methods, different methods, what all can be determined? So ideally, we would want to detect as much. We would like to find as much as is possible, but that is that is somewhat out of our scope, at least from the technology that we have right now. Okay. I'm so sorry, but I am not. Uh, I'll take the questions later. Oh, you can just put them in the chat box. Okay.
Okay, they will remain in the chat box.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
can discuss them later.
You don't have to worry about that.
Sure. So, what all can be determined? So, here are a few essential aspects of exoplanets which we can determine, which is the orbital parameters, the basically the shape of the orbit, its another other parameters related to it, the size and mass of the exoplanet, the atmosphere of it, its habitability, and extraterrestrial life, if any. So, detection techniques. So, here are six basic methods used to detect exoplanets. So, each of them are suited for different kinds of stars, and each have their own limitations as well as advantages. So, the first one is radial velocity method, or the Doppler method. Next, we have transits. Then we have pulsar timing. Then direct imaging, gravitational microlensing, astrometry. So, we will be, so a short introduction will be provided for all of them, but I'll focus mainly on transits because it is one of the method which has proven to be the most effective one. And also because our for the next session, which will be taken at 2:30, will focus mainly on transits, actually entirely on transits. So, yes. So first one, radial velocity. The principle of radial velocity is that we mean that as we know that the planet revolves around the star, but it is not exactly that. The star is not always stationary. The star also experience there is a mass of center and the star also rotates around it. So we measure this wobble of the star, which is caused by the gravitational pull of the orbiting planet. So this wobble of the star, it causes a Doppler shift in the star spectral lines, and according to that shift, we find out whether there is an exoplanet or not, and other parameters related to it. And this is an AG189733b is an example of an exoplanet which was detected using the radial velocity method. So moving ahead, we next have pulsar timing. So it observes the variations in the timing of pulsar signals. So pulsar is basically also it is another light source. So some planets they orbit a pulsar. So we observe these variations in the timing of the pulsar signals, and due to the gravitational influence of the orbiting planet, it alters the timing of the pulses. So pulsars are known to have a fixed period of time, and they are very like it is all known that they have a fixed periods, and it is usually mostly untethered, but the presence of an exoplanet can influence this, and it can alter the timing of the pulses. So, pulsar timing has also helped us detect the lower. And I think the first exoplanet was detected using pulsar timing. Then, direct imaging. Direct imaging is just as the name suggests, it is imaged directly. So it captures images of planets by blocking the host star's light, because there is a light from the host star, right? So if we want to detect an exoplanet, we will need to block that light. It is not entirely blocked, but we try our best to block it as much as we can. And this blockage this reveals faint planets in the surrounding space based on the reflected or emitted light. Now, direct imaging is obviously it is very difficult, so we do not have many examples of direct imaging. Like there are a lot of examples in general, but it is still a bit difficult to a bit difficult to get it. So these are some images of direct imaging. You can see that it is quite difficult to even see it or to even understand it, like whether there is an exoplanet or not. But still, it is one of the detection techniques which gives us a full proof, a guarantee that yes, there is an exoplanet once it is done. So moving ahead, then you have gravitational microlensing. I think people might know what gravitational microlensing is. So it detects a temporary increase in brightness when a planet's gravity acts as a lens. So basically, it is magnifying the light from a distant background star. So the gravitational microlensing, I think this also explains what gravitational microlensing is. So a presence of a planet, it increases the brightness when the planet's gravity it acts as a lens, and it increases the brightness of the background star, thus also giving us a hint that there might be something more to that star. So probably an exoplanet. Next, we have an astrometry. So measures a star's precise position changes caused by the gravitational pull of an orbiting planet. So detecting small positional shifts in the star's trajectory. It is quite self-explanatory. Still, it so because of the gravitational pull of the planet, it measures the star's precise position changes, and these small shifts in the star's trajectory are found out. And if and also we can find from this the other parameters related to the exoplanet. For example, with the gravitational pull, we can determine its mass and probably its size and other things as well. So as you can see, all the methods have different, they target different stars as well as different types of exoplanets. So all of them are meant for different purposes, but all of them provide a very good way of detecting whether there might be an exoplanet or not. So coming to one of the most famous methods, transits. So most known exoplanets have been discovered using this method. And so in easy terms, a transit occurs when a planet passes between a star and its observer. So I know that this is just a statement, but we can see it over here. So now transits, as you can see over here, eh, now suppose I am an observer, there is a star in front of me. So there needs to be a plan. So a planet needs to orbit between us for us to observe a transit. As you can see over here, a phase on, oh, like if we can see the entire orbit, which so like if the planet is always in the view, there is no transit. We just need the orbit needs to be in a specific position, in a specific orientation for us to be able to see transit. So which is the edge on one. So as both the images, they they point on it that we this is the orientation we need. And in real life also we can observe transit. We do observe transit when a Mars or Venus comes between uh, it revolves it revolves around the sun, and at some point we do observe transit there as well. So just a real life example. So just a very newer example, not a real life one. All are real life ones. Okay, so the theory. Now, what do we do with this? So what we do is we observe the light, which we receive some light from the star, So we receive the star's light and we observe the dimming of this light. So we take in the light, we input the star's light in the form of light curves. And when this planet appears to move across the face of the star, light seems to have decreased since some of the light which we are receiving is blocked by the planet. So this light is decreased, and we thus find out whether an exoplanet is there or not. Now, this light can be blocked because of a number of reasons, but how we confirm that it is an exoplanet or not is something that you will learn further ahead, maybe in the next session. So, okay, so as a transiting body, as it passes in front of a larger light source, there is a drop in brightness or the flux which we receive from the star. And if this is seen in a periodic manner, then we can say that it is an exoplanet. So we see this so we observe this change of brightness or the flux in the form of transit light curves, and the effect repeats at the orbital period. So according to the planet's period, we observe the effect. So now, what is a light curve? A light curve, as you can see here, a light curve is basically it is just a graph which shows the brightness of an object over a period of time. It is basically just brightness versus time graph. Now, it is not just used for basically for the exoplanet detection. It has a lot of applications to it. So it is useful in the study of objects that change their brightness over time, such as novae, supernovae, and variable stars. We use this for exoplanet detection is because we can observe a change in the flux which we receive from the star as an exoplanet passes by. So that is how it helps us in the process of transit. So I hope that what a light curve is clear, because in the following session we will be seeing these different type of light curves, and what how can you form it, what are the different changes, like how is it observed, what are the different things in it, and other parameters related to it. So this slide is just meant for you, just like a reminder slide that what is brightness. So brightness is a measure of how much light appears to be coming from a source. I think we all know that what brightness is. This is just a definition to it. This is rather an easy one. The further one is rather a bit more complicated. So it is the subjective visual sensation of the intensity of light from a surface or point source. It can also refer to quality of being luminous or emitting or reflecting light. So basically, like how much light appears to be coming from a source, an easy and simple definition. This slide is just supposed to be a reminder slide. It stresses pretty much nothing. So yes, moving ahead. Now, in the following session, we will be plotting light curves. So while we are plotting any sort of graph, if we are over there, we are plotting from some sort of data, right? So whenever we are working with data, we do encounter some sort of errors. So the type of errors which we will be tackling in the next session. There are two type of errors which we will be looking at. So there are systematic errors and random errors. Now these errors, in general, they are very important. I believe that you guys might have learned it now but it also has a practical application, because we want to minimize these errors as much as we can. So here we will be discussing about two type of errors: systematic error and random error. The name are explanatory, but still, let's see what systematic error is. So, systematic error, as the name suggests, they are not determined by chance, but they occur due to inaccuracies that are in the system. So there are some inaccuracies which are already inherent in the system, and so they are not something which can happen by chance. It is likely that it will occur whenever we use that system, whenever the system is in use or something or like that. We will mostly always encounter that error. So these errors are also with the one with a non-zero mean. So for example, if we have taken some reading and we have first, so for example, I have taken an orbital period from the exoplanet detection. I found out the orbital period. Now I obviously will not I will not just take one orbital period once and I'll be like, okay, I'm done. I will take it I will take it like 6, 7, or as much as is required. I will take it that many times. So, and then I will average out all the observations that I've taken. And then this final mean observation is what I will say that, okay, this is the orbital period. So in every observation that we have taken, there is some sort of error. But this error, since it is a systematic error, it is highly likely that it was present in all the observations that we have taken. So as we take the mean of all the observations, this error is not going to be, it is not going to reduce down to zero. It will always be a non-zero mean because there is some sort of error, because there is always some sort of error in the system. It is pretty much present in all the systems. So this is the sort of error which is pretty much always non-zero. And so in general, they are constant and they are predictable. So if we have some sort of true value with respect to that, they are always predictable. So in all the instruments which you will be or you have already dealt with, you will see that there is always some sort of minimum error which can be calculated. So an example for a systematic error is instrumental error. So any error from the instrument, from any instrument. This is not just it is not just limited to astronomy or anything. It is for all the instruments. There is some sort of instrumental error and some sort of calibration error. There are a lot many, but we will stick to these two since they are the major ones. Next, we have random errors. As the name suggests, they are random. So they occur irregularly, and hence they are random. They can arise due to unpredictable fluctuations in the experimental conditions. An easy example of this is basically human error. So if the first reading is taken by you, the second reading is taken by a friend, there can be some sort of fluctuation in that, and that is one of the thing. That is one of the so a change in the observer is one of the reason for a random error. So examples, a mechanical vibration of the experimental setup. The setup is not placed well, some vibration in that, or the setup is it just moved or something. So it's things like that. They come in random error or errors by the observer while taking the readings. So like that, we have these two type of errors. They will be discussed ahead, and now in the following session, we will understand how we can minimize these errors, both of them. So now, as we saw earlier, that light curves are they are useful for in the study of different type of entities. So one of them is supernova. So I believe everyone might know what a supernova is. Still, let's just see what it is and how, and mainly how it occurs. So, a star is during its lifetime, it is balancing two opposite forces. So, the star's gravity, it is trying to squeeze the star. It is trying to squeeze the star into a tight pole, into a tight ball. But there is an opposing force to it, which is of the burning of the nuclear fuel in the star's core, which creates an outward pressure, and it creates a strong outward pressure because mostly these two forces are in equilibrium. But as you know that as the star's size increases, so this outward pressure is in general more. As the life is ending, or as the life of the star is ending, this pressure, it increases. So this outward push, it resists the inward squeeze of the gravity. So, but when a massive star, when it runs out of fuel, it cools off. So this pressure in general it reduces. This pressure drops, gravity wins, and the star it suddenly collapses. And this collapse it happens so quickly that it creates enormous shock waves that cause the outer part of the star to explode. And this explosion is what we call a supernova. It is one of the brightest phenomena that humans have ever observed or they have ever come across. And as you can see, it looks very beautiful. Though this image is processed, it is uh, like even the death of a star, it looks majestic. So here we come to the end of it. So these are some useful links. So the first link is supposed to be more like a further read. So if you found all of this interesting, then you can learn more about all of the methods in detail in from the module on exoplanet detection. Now the remaining of the links are mostly supposed to be for you to get a visual interest in the exoplanets. So it is NASA's Eye on Exoplanet, where you can see a 3D representation of these exoplanets, like what we think these exoplanets might look like. And there is also a link on Exoplanet Archive. So all the exoplanets which have been detected till now, the methods and the planet parameters, the star parameters, all of them can be found on Exoplanet Archive. It is really interesting. I hope you go through all of these links. NASA has created some really interesting things. I hope you all go through all of them, which brings us to the end of it. So I'll stop sharing and we can look for questions. Okay.
Yeah. So you read the chat box, or should I?
Yeah, yeah.
I read it out. Because
Uh,
there's a lot of discussion, and some of them have been answered. Uh,
okay.
so how planets are named? Uh,
Oh, okay. This sir explained this. First planet is star name. Then this, yeah. Oh, I think sir answered most of them.
yes.
There are more specific questions on microlensing. And, some of the questions are there, which I
Yes.
did not answer because you will be the best one to answer, especially when it comes.
Yeah.
Uh, is it okay if students can unmute and ask directly?
I mean, yeah, it is
If the
fine.
questions are not answered, then we can ask
Y-
them to raise hand and unmute.
Yeah, okay, that works as well. I can see, okay, maybe sir answered this one. Not sure. Okay, so if someone is raising hand, I can't see it.
Okay. If anybody has any question, also unmute and ask. Please raise your hand. Meanwhile, you can go through the chat box, and whatever you think should be answered, you can answer. Otherwise, they can, of course, later on they can ask in Google Classroom also. That option is also open.
If someone has raised their hand, you can unmute and ask. And I hope sir also
So there
helps
are
me
some
in answering.
raised hands. I will, Rajeshwaran, uh, please unmute and ask your question.
Ma'am, I have one question about detection of exoplanets, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, in the case of Kepler system, there are 3 to 4 planets of Earth like Mars, and they are orbiting the Sun with almost same orbital time period. So while using transit method, will there be a confusion in detecting which planet was which?
So I believe it will mostly be not, because it is less likely that all the planets are visible in in the orbit at once. So I believe that if we are focusing on a single orbit, then we will be able to tell that we will first of all be able to uh, find the first planet, and according to that we can also figure out the other planets. So I
There is an interesting case of TRAPPIST system, for example, one of the TRAPPIST system where looking at the light curve, because there is a gradual decrease in the intensity. So looking at those steps, one can calculate how many planets are actually at a particular time. So basically, it is a study of light curve, and I think that you will be doing how the intensity is falling or how it is changing, and measuring the steps, how much it is falling. I think that you will be doing through the analysis, data analysis.
Yes, Parth Sarda, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I had a question with regard. So, I mean, you can detect exoplanets using these methods, but to analyze the chemical composition and the things that are there, so actually to measure the parameters that are essential, because at the end of the day, generally, the conquest of finding exoplanets is generally towards if you can find uh, life or anything to do with uh, something that might support life. So we look at Goldilocks zones, look at habitable zones and stuff like that. So how do you incorporate that into account as well?
So I believe first it is we first of all we detect an exoplanet. Now all of these, they have their separate methods, they have their separate things to it. But first we are just finding whether there is something outside. And now what this was just a basic session. So in the further following session, I believe that you can go more in depth in all of these things, and these questions will be more relevant there, since you will be actually looking at the different light curves, and you can also figure out how can all of these other things can be incorporated in it.
Yeah, I would also like to know, like, I think there was this method by Sarah Sieger and Niku Madhusudan. They published a paper in like 2021, and it was basically stated as like, so you use biomass related metrics. So basically, if you have a biosignature, which are like the golden standard to actually find if you have life or something, so you actually use look at their spectroscopic data, and then if you see any correlation, you can actually have like a good like a good metric to define if life can be sustained. And I think there are some more metrics and other things in that.
Yes.
This particular section is on a specific
Yes, sir.
method of transit and how data analysis can be done. So it was a prerequisite section here. And I think we are focusing only on one particular method. We are not even looking at spectroscopical aspect. We are not looking at the aspect of what is the nature of the star, what is the spectral class of a star, and therefore decide whether the given planet is in Goldilocks zone or not. So this particular section, I think, is restricted to transit method and how to do the analysis. So I think the question is beyond the scope of this session.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to ask? So I think so all the questions in the chat box are not related to the present talk. So I guess we can thank the speaker in the session here. Right. So thank you very much. Yeah. Is there any?
The next part.
Your voice is breaking. Hello.
So there was one thing I saw in the chat box, which was can the links be shared? So your links can okay. I can share the links in the chat box, but since we are almost at the end, I'll share the entire presentation and you can go through all the links.
You can share them on the classroom.
Yeah, I'll share it on the classroom.
Yes.
So
Right, sir. Is there anything else?
yeah, there was another thing which was the session was supposed to be till. I believe there is nothing else, but yes, the session was supposed to be till 10:30, but the material in itself is this was just supposed to be the theory. So theory in
Okay. So
general
would you
is
want to take the second session now, or continue the second session now, or would you want to do it in the afternoon only?
I think it will be better in the afternoon because right
Okay.
now we don't have sufficient time to conduct the second session, but it is yeah, the first session
Okay.
is all over. So
Fine, fine. Yeah, sure.
mm, okay then. Thank you everyone.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you,
Kiran,
sir.
Thank you very much. We should thank you. Thank you very much for taking your time out and giving this exposure on exoplanet to students. I'm sure it will be a good starting point for the next presentation. So we end the session here and meet at 11 for the next talk. Is that fine? Thank you very much again, Ms. Yashasvi Tayude.
Thank you, sir. Thank you everyone.
On behalf of Wilson College, I thank you, and also on behalf of IIPT Mumbai chapter. And thank you again for Wilson College for organizing this winter school, which is really
thank
useful.
you, sir. I mean, it is our program only, so we need not thank ourselves. Yeah.
No, I'm thanking on behalf of IIPT and my personal self. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.